Hello again, friends. I had a plan. It was a good plan, I think. You see, Kate has been asking for Shrek. I reached out to the publishers of the book because, sadly, the author, William Steig, has passed on. May he rest in peace. I think I jumped through the wrong hoops, though, because I never heard back. But then I read The Wolf Who Cried Boy, and it became clear to me that if I give credit where credit is due and don't make any money from the video, which I don't because we are a teeny tiny channel in the YouTuberverse, then I can still read the story. So I ordered the book from our best local bookstore and waited. I was so excited to be able to at last read this to Kate. And I waited, because she's only been asking for several months. And I waited, because how long could it take to ship a book from a local bookstore?
Yes, get over there!
I am still waiting. My wonderful plan has failed. As soon as I receive the book, then I will absolutely read it to you, but for now I guess we will have to start on our Charles Perrault journey. Then I need to find a scary troll story from Manta Ray of Hope. I'm open to suggestions. I think I have a couple of other requests, but I forgot to write them down in my book of requests, so those will take a little longer while I look through the beloved comments to find them. Also, sometimes the requests come from Facebook, so I have to look there too. Unless you would like to help me out by re-requesting them in the comments below. I would make my eyes large and anime-like, but since I can't, I've asked the cameraman to draw this picture instead. They are so good at this sort of thing. So let us start our Charles Perrault journey of stories I have already done, with one that has over 500 different versions out there. I could really do nothing but Cinderella for the next 10 years without repeating a version, but that would get very boring. I might be open to doing more versions in the future. Maybe I will look for the story of Rhodopis, a Greek tale which was written sometime between 7 BCE and 23 CE. Apparently, that is believed to be the actual first version of Cinderella. I wonder, Siri, what is Latin for Cinderella?
Cinderella. Cinderella.
Oh, so just Cinderella, but with an accent. Who knew? So now I bring to you Cinderella, or The Little Glass Slipper, by Charles Perrault. Once there was a gentleman who married, for his second wife, the proudest and most haughty woman that was ever seen. What was his criteria? I need a high-maintenance woman who will spend my money and make me as miserable as humanly possible. You, blonde woman, with the asymmetrical haircut, too much makeup, and designer handbag. You were the woman of my dreams. She had, by a former husband, 2 daughters of her own, who were indeed exactly like her in all things. You know, there was a comedian named Henny Youngman who was very famous in the 1950s. Most jokes people think of as cliché, Mr. Youngman actually wrote. Why am I telling you this in the middle of a story? Because he had a joke perfect for this situation. Why do men die before their wives? Because they want to. Well, back to the story. He had, likewise, by another wife, a young daughter, but of unparalleled goodness and sweetness of temper, which she took from her mother, who was the best creature in the world. Oh, how sweet! It talks about her inner beauty rather than her physical appearance. That's wonderful! No sooner were the ceremonies of the wedding over, but the stepmother began to show herself in her true colors. She could not bear the good qualities of this pretty girl. And I take it back. 2 sentences. You couldn't even make it 2 sentences. And the less because they made her own daughters appear the more odious. She employed her in all the meanest work of the house. I'm guessing she is the daughter. We should name Mom so we don't get confused. How about Linda? scoured the dishes, tables, etc., and cleared Madame's chamber and those of the Mrs., Linda's daughters. She slept in a sorry garret on a wretched straw bed, while her sisters slept in fine rooms with floors all inlaid on beds of the very newest fashion, and where they had looking-glasses so large they could see themselves at their full length from head to foot. The poor girl bore it all patiently, and dared not tell her father, who would have scolded her, for his wife governed him entirely. Well, looks like we have the same Father of the Year from the last story. Maybe only Disney killed him off because Mr. Disney was a good father to his 2 daughters and could not believe any father would be so awful. Mr. Disney is probably very happy to have passed on before they invented Reddit. When she had done her work, she used to go to the chimney corner and sit down there in the cinders and ashes, which caused her to be called Cinder Wench. Only the younger sister, who was not so rude and uncivil as the older one, called her Cinderella. However, Cinderella, notwithstanding her coarse apparel, was 100 times more beautiful than her sisters, although they were always dressed very richly. Why is a woman's worth always tied to her physical appearance? I just don't understand why the outer shell is prized so highly above the inner strength. It happened that the king's son gave a ball and invited all persons of fashion to it. Our young misses were also invited, for they cut a very grand figure among those of quality. They were mightily delighted at this invitation, and wonderfully busy in selecting the gowns, petticoats, and hair-dressing that would best become them. This was a new difficulty for Cinderella, for it was she who ironed her sisters' linen and pleated their ruffles. They talked all day long of nothing but how they should be dressed. "Oh, please, please, please don't spend the next several sentences describing their fashions." "For my part," said the eldest, "I will wear my red velvet suit with French trimming." "And I," said the youngest, "shall have my usual petticoat, but then, to make amends for that, I will put on my gold-flowered cloak and my diamond stomacher, which is far from being the most ordinary one in the world." Dang it. They sent for the best hairdresser they could get to make their headpieces and adjust their hairdos, and they had their red brushes and patches from Mademoiselle de la Pouche. Lady of the Dog? Huh. Siri? Woman of the poached masculine form. I'm just going to put a pin in that. They also consulted Cinderella in all these matters, for she had excellent ideas, and her advice was always good. Indeed, she even offered her services to fix their hair, which they very willingly accepted. As she was doing this, they said to her, "Cinderella, would you not like to go to the ball?" "It's a trap!" "Alas," said she, "you only jeer at me. It is not for such as I am to go to such a place." "You are quite right," they replied. "It would make the people laugh to see a cinder wench at a ball." Well, at least she didn't fall for it. Anyone but Cinderella would have fixed their hair awry, but she was very good and dressed them perfectly well. No kick-me signs or anything. They were so excited that they hadn't eaten a thing for almost 2 days. And then when they went to the ball and collapsed and no one ever saw them again. No? Well, I can hope. Then they broke more than a dozen laces trying to have themselves laced up so tightly as to give them a fine, slender shape. And then they went to the ball and collapsed for lack of oxygen, and no one ever saw them again. No? Dang it. They were continually in front of their looking-glass. At last the happy day came. They went to the court, and Cinderella followed them with her eyes as long as she could. When she lost sight of them, she started to cry. Her godmother... Wait. Who? I mean, where does she come from? Does she live here, or did she just poof in? I need answers here, story. Who saw her all in tears, asked her what was the matter. "Ah! Strange woman from nowhere in my house!" I wish I could. I wish I could. She was not able to speak, the rest being interrupted by her tears and sobbing. This godmother of hers, who was a fairy, said to her, "You wish that you could go to the ball. Is that not it?" Did I miss a page? Are they maybe stuck together? This just seems to kind of come out of nowhere. "Yes," cried Cinderella with a great sigh. "Well," said her godmother, "be but a good girl, and I will contrive that you shall go." Who talks like this? Honestly. Then she took her into her chamber and said to her, "Run into the garden and bring me a pumpkin." "Woman, we were just outside. Could you have not mentioned the pumpkin before we came in?" Cinderella went immediately to gather the finest she could get and brought it to her godmother, not being able to imagine how this pumpkin could get her to go to the ball. Her godmother scooped out all the inside of it, leaving nothing but the rind. Having done this, she struck the pumpkin with her wand, and it was very instantly turned into a fine coach, gilded all over with gold. In her chamber? How are you going to get it back out? Couldn't you have done this while you were still outside? She then went to look into her mousetrap, where she found 6 mice, all alive, and ordered Cinderella to lift up the little trap door. She gave each mouse, as it went out, a little tap with her wand, and the mouse was that moment turned into a fine horse, which altogether made a very fine set of 6 horses of a beautiful mouse-colored dapple gray. Still in her chamber? Where 6 horses and a coach should never be? You are not going to the ball, Cinderella, unless you can fit these through the door. Being at a loss for a coachman, Cinderella said, "I will go and see if there is not a rat in the rat trap that we can turn into a coachman." "You are right," replied her godmother. "Go and look." I feel like this is a slight on coach drivers. Uber, Lyft, taxis. Cinderella brought the trap to her, and in it there were 3 huge rats. The fairy chose the one which had the largest beard. Rats have beards? Touched him with her wand, and turned him into a fat, jolly coachman who had the smartest whiskers that eyes ever beheld. But what happened to the beard? After that she said to her, "Go again into the garden. You will find 6 lizards behind the watering pot. Bring them to me." "No! You bring all this stuff outside, woman! I will not bring more things into my chambers!" She had no sooner done so, but her godmother turned them into 6 footmen, who skipped up immediately behind the coach, with their liveries all bedappled with gold and silver, and clung as close behind each other as if they had done nothing else their whole lives. The fairy then said to Cinderella, "Well, you see here an equipage fit to go to the ball with. Are you not pleased with it?" "No! It's all still in her bedchambers. How is she supposed to get this out?" "Oh, yes," she cried. "But must I go in these nasty rags?" "Yep, that's the biggest problem, the dress. Not that you have a coach and 6 in your kitchen." Her godmother then touched her with her wand, and at the same instant her clothes turned into cloth of gold and silver, all beset with jewels. Wait, so they are still rags, just really pretty and expensive rags? Well, I guess they are no longer nasty rags. This done, she gave her a pair of glass slippers, the prettiest in the whole world. On average, how many glass slippers are there in the whole world? Being thus decked out, she got up into her coach, but her godmother, above all things, commanded her not to stay past midnight, telling her at the same time that if she stayed 1 moment longer, the coach would be a pumpkin again, her horses mice, her coachman a rat, her footmen lizards, and that her clothes would become just as they were before. So, no longer nice rags, then? She will make an impression on the other guests, that's for sure. Now I know why all eyes were on her. She promised her godmother to leave the ball before midnight and then drove away. Apparently through a wall. Scarcely able to contain herself for joy, the king's son, who was told that a great princess whom nobody knew had arrived, ran out to receive her in her fine and jewel-coated rags with mortar and bricks still hanging from her really orange coach. He gave her his hand as she alighted from the coach and led her into the hall. Among the company there was immediately a profound silence. You think? Everyone stopped dancing, and the violin ceased to play. So entranced was everyone with this singular beauty of the unknown newcomer. And a new fashion trend was born. Nothing was then heard but a confused noise of, "How beautiful she is! How beautiful she is!" The king himself, old as he was, could not help watching her and telling the queen softly that it was a long time since he had seen so beautiful and lovely a creature, which was quickly followed by divorce papers. And the ladies were busied in considering her clothes and headdress. What headdress? Were there bits of brick in her hair? Nobody said anything about a headdress.
Is this rubble?
Hoping to have some made next day after the same pattern, provided they could find such fine materials and as able hands to make them. The king's son led her to the most honorable seat, and afterwards took her out to dance with him. She danced so very gracefully that they all more and more admired her. A fine meal was served up, but the young prince ate not a morsel, so intently was he busied in gazing upon her. And that's not creepy at all.
I love you.
She went and sat down by her sisters, showing them 1,000 civilities, giving them part of the oranges and citrons which the prince had presented her with, which very much surprised them, for they did not know her. While Cinderella was thus amusing her sisters, she heard the clock strike 11 3/4, whereupon she immediately made a curtsy to the company and hurried away as fast as she could. So no dramatic running down the stairs as the clock strikes behind her, and her nice rags change slowly back into not nice rags. Arriving home, she ran to seek out her godmother, and, after having thanked her, she said she could not but heartily wish she might go to the ball the next day as well, because the king's son had invited her. When? And it only said one day, so how is it also going on tomorrow? I swear these pages are sticking together. As she was eagerly telling her godmother everything that had happened at the ball, her two sisters knocked at the door, which Cinderella ran and opened. "You stayed such a long time," she cried, gaping, rubbing her eyes, and stretching herself as if she had been sleeping. Wait, they knocked? Gosh, that's awfully nice of them. Also, didn't they hear her talking to her godmother? She had not, however, had any manner of inclination to sleep while they were away from home. "If you had been at the ball," said one of her sisters, "you would not have been tired with it. The finest princess was there, the most beautiful that mortal eyes have ever seen. She showed us 1,000 civilities, and gave us oranges and citrons." Cinderella seemed very indifferent in the matter. Indeed, she asked them the name of the princess, but they told her that they did not know it, and that the king's son was very uneasy on her account, and would give all the world to know who she was. At this, Cinderella, smiling, replied, "She must then be very beautiful indeed. How happy you have been! Could not I see her? Ah, dear Charlotte, do lend me your yellow dress, which you wear every day." "Ha! A name! One of the sisters has a name! That's so wonderful!" "Yes, to be sure," cried Charlotte. "Lend my clothes to such a dirty cinder wench as you are. I should be such a fool." And she's awful. Well, there's that then. Cinderella indeed well expected such an answer, and was very glad of the refusal, for she would have been sadly put to it if her sister had lent her what she had asked for jestingly. So she asked the bad sister on purpose. Got it. The next day the two sisters were at the ball, and so was Cinderella, but dressed even more magnificently than before. So, not in glowed-up rags? I'm guessing there was a fairy godmother interlude here. The king's son was always by her and never ceased his compliments and kind speeches to her. That sounds really annoying. All this was so far from being tiresome to her, and indeed she quite forgot what her godmother had told her. She thought that it was no later than 11 when she counted the clock striking 12. Oh, here is the famous runaway while the clock is chiming scene. Good to know it's a story original. She jumped up and fled, as nimble as a deer. The prince followed, but could not overtake her. She left behind one of her glass slippers, which the prince picked up most carefully. She reached home, but quite out of breath, and in her nasty old clothes, having nothing left of all her finery but one of the little slippers, the mate to the one that she had dropped. The guards at the palace gate were asked if they had not seen a princess go out. They replied that they had seen nobody leave but a young girl, very shabbily dressed, and who had more of the air of a poor country wench than a gentlewoman. When the two sisters returned from the ball, Cinderella asked them if they had been well entertained, and if the fine lady had been there. They told her yes, but that she hurried away immediately when it struck 12, and with so much haste that she dropped one of her little glass slippers, the prettiest in the world, which the king's son had picked up, that he had done nothing but look at her all the time at the ball. That's creepy. And that most certainly he was very much in love with the beautiful person who owned the glass slipper. What they said was very true, for a few days later the king's son had proclaimed, by sound of trumpet, that he would marry her whose foot this slipper would just fit. Did he know that she was special, or did he just not realize that two different women could have the same shoe size? They began to try it on, the princesses, then the duchesses, and all the court, but in vain. It was brought to the two sisters, who did all they possibly could to force their foot into the slipper, but they did not succeed. Cinderella, who saw all this, and who knew that it was her slipper, said to them, laughing, "Let me see if it will not fit me." Her sisters burst out laughing, and began to banter with her. The gentleman who was sent to try the slipper looked earnestly at Cinderella, and, finding her very handsome, said that it was only just that she should try as well, and that he had orders to let everyone try. This Cinderella is seriously cheeky. He had Cinderella sit down, and, putting the slipper to her foot, he found it went on very easily, fitting her as if it had been made of wax. Her two sisters were greatly astonished, but then even more so when Cinderella pulled out of her pocket the other slipper and put it on her other foot. Then in came her godmother. Was she just waiting outside, like some sort of talk show reveal? And touched her wand to Cinderella's clothes, making them richer and more magnificent than any of those she had worn before. And now her two sisters found her to be that fine, beautiful lady whom they had seen at the ball. They threw themselves at her feet to beg pardon for all the ill treatment they had made her undergo. Cinderella took them up, and, as she embraced them, said that she forgave them with all her heart, and wanted them always to love her.
And in my happiness, I forgive you all.
Well, that is the least believable part of the story. She was taken to the young prince, dressed as she was. He thought she was more charming than before, and a few days after married her. Cinderella, who was no less good than beautiful, gave her two sisters lodgings in the palace, and that very same day matched them with two great lords of the court. And apparently Dad and Stepmom were never heard from again. I guess this one actually is closer to the story I've always known. There is no tree that contains the spirit of the dead mother. There are only 2 days of the ball. A fairy godmother does appear, but she feels kind of like an afterthought, and although the mother is said to be horrible, she barely appears in the story. It's like she and Dad just no longer matter after the initial description. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a good story. It's just, I have to give this one to the Grimm brothers. I think their overall story is better. Well, we come to the end of another story. This is the part where I ask you to like, share, and subscribe. Currently, there are over 130 of us now. That's a very nice number, but a few more couldn't hurt. I would also like to remind you of the notification bell. That way, when I put out a story, you will know about it. I would like to thank Pixabay.com for all the wonderful sounds and images they provide. They really have so much there. Sometimes it's fun just to go and look. I would also very much like to thank you, my friends, for coming here week after week, for leaving comments and likes. I want to thank you for sharing my stories on Facebook so new people can find us. Your support, your friendship, is what keeps this channel going on those days when I start to doubt myself. I cannot thank you enough. And finally, with all my heart, a special thank you to my Patreon friends.